Welcome. You're listening to Field Notes from the Oversoul. This is episode 4, Integration, the Breath After Collapse. This is not just a podcast. It's a reflective space, a place where we slow down enough to notice what is happening inside the body. When I use the word oversoul, I'm referring to the most regulated, steady version of your own awareness. Not something outside you, but the steadier part of you that shows up when your nervous system feels safe. There is nothing to achieve here, only to observe. Let your breath soften. Let your shoulders release. Let your jaw unclench slightly. Notice how your body feels right now. Notice the weight of your body where you're sitting. Take one slow inhale and a longer exhale. That longer exhale signals safety to your nervous system. And with that longer exhale, your nervous system has already begun to settle. That is how integration starts. Not through force, not through insight, but through small moments of regulation like this one. You are not trying to become steady. You are allowing your body to remember how. Welcome back to Field Notes from the Oversoul. In our last episode, we explored collapse and reorganization, the moment when the old internal structures that kept us functioning begin to dissolve. We learned that collapse is not failure. It is not regression. It is not weakness. Collapse is the moment when the system can no longer sustain self-override. Episode 3 was about destabilization, about the spike, about what it feels like when the structure cracks. Today, we explore what happens after the spike, not the trigger, but the return. Today, we enter integration, not metaphorically, biologically. Integration is what happens when your nervous system begins to stabilize again. It is the breath after collapse, the stillness after the storm. The moment your body whispers, "We made it." When the body realizes, "I survived that." And something subtle shifts. Your reactions soften, your breath deepens. And the next time you're triggered, because you will be again, you return to being steady more quickly. This is not enlightenment. It is regulation. It is the body learning to trust itself again. And regulation changes how you think, how you respond, and what you choose. Before we go further, I'd like to define some of the language I'll use in this episode. If a term sounds unfamiliar, I'll explain it. If something sounds poetic, I'll ground it in how the body works. Because this isn't abstract. This is about how your nervous system functions in real time. The first term is integration. What is integration as it pertains to our discussion today? Integration is the phase after collapse, when the nervous system begins to stabilize at a new level of safety. Your nervous system is the network in your body that detects threat or safety. It includes your brain, spinal cord, vagus nerve, and the systems responsible for fight or flight, freeze, and rest. When collapse happens, your system becomes overwhelmed. Integration is when it begins to settle again. You may notice your breath no longer tightens automatically when something changes. Your body does not brace as quickly. You still get triggered, but you calm down faster. In my life, integration didn't arrive as some dramatic shift. It arrived as awareness. I'm only now realizing how often I adjusted myself to stabilize other people, how quickly I filled silence, how subtly I changed my tone if someone seemed tense, how automatically I moved to smooth discomfort before it could grow. I didn't think of this as control, but it was. I was managing the emotional field to keep everyone else steady, even if it cost me my own steadiness, my own stillness, my own breath. I thought of it as being considerate, being mature, being emotionally aware, and in many ways it was. But it was also vigilance. I was so used to being on guard, I didn't even notice it anymore. When I began to stop stepping in, even in small ways, my body reacted. Not because something was wrong, but because the pattern of stepping in was so familiar. Without smoothing the moment, I felt unsure. Without adjusting myself, I felt exposed. Without feeling silence, I didn't know what would happen next. That uncertainty felt big, not dangerous, just unfamiliar. So integration looked ordinary from the outside. I didn't immediately respond to a message that stirred anxiety. I allowed silence in a meeting instead of filling it. I stopped explaining myself before anyone asked me to. Inside, those pauses felt significant. There was space where habit used to be, and nothing collapsed. No one left, no one attacked, no crisis unfolded. And my nervous system registered something new. I don't have to manage every moment to remain safe. That is integration. It's not perfection. It's not instant calm. It's when your nervous system stops trying to manage everything unconsciously. It's when you stop carrying the weight of other people's emotions, expectations, and reactions without realizing it. It's learning that steadiness doesn't require constant adjustment. Integration isn't easy at first. It takes repetition. It means tolerating uncertainty without rushing to fix it. It means letting discomfort rise and fall without stepping in. Over time, my body is learning something new. Safety doesn't depend on constant management, and that changes everything. The next term I'd like to define is baseline. A baseline is the state your body returns to when nothing is actively happening. It is your default nervous system setting. Before collapse, my baseline was subtle bracing. Even when nothing was wrong, my jaw held tension. I noticed it throughout the day and was even clenching and grinding my teeth at night while I slept. My shoulders were lifted slightly all the time. My thoughts scanned ahead. That felt normal. It felt responsible. But it was performance-based regulation. A performance-based baseline depends on doing something correctly to feel safe. For me, that meant being agreeable, being insightful, being emotionally steady for others, being prepared, being composed. If I performed those roles well, I felt stable. If I didn't, anxiety rose. After collapse and reorganization, a new baseline began forming. It was quieter, Some mornings I woke up and didn't rehearse the day. Some conversations ended without replaying them in my mind. Some financial concerns arose, and my body didn't spike the way it used to. That is a new baseline. It's when regulation is not earned through performance. It is sustained through presence. Presence is sustained awareness in the body without bracing. It feels like this. You send a message and you don't reread it 3 times. You leave a conversation and you don't replay every sentence. You disappoint someone mildly and your body does not collapse. You sit down to rest and you don't justify it. That was a difficult one for me. Usually if I was sitting down, my mind was always running through the things I could or should be doing instead of just resting. Presence is the quieting of the internal audit. An internal audit is the mental review process where you scan yourself for error. Was that too much, too little, too emotional, too distant? When the audit softens, your system stabilizes, and something simpler emerges. I am allowed to exist as I am in this moment. That is a new baseline. The next term is coherence. I've defined this in previous episodes, but let's define it again here because repetition can help us remember. Coherence is alignment between your internal state and your external expression. When you are coherent, what you say lines up with what you feel. What you do lines up with what matters to you. And your body isn't bracing while you pretend everything is fine. Coherence does not mean you're calm all the time. It means your internal experience and your outward behavior are no longer in conflict. For years, I could say, I'm fine, while tightening internally. I could reassure someone while my diaphragm contracted. I could appear composed while bracing beneath the surface. That is incoherence, and the body pays for it. When your internal experience and outward behavior do not match, your nervous system must maintain 2 realities at once. It must suppress the emotion that is rising, sustain the performance that is expected, monitor the environment for reactions, regulate posture, tone, and expression. That takes energy. Over time, that cost accumulates. It can show up as chronic jaw tension, tight shoulders, shallow breath, digestive strain, persistent fatigue. In my life, I often felt exhausted after conversations that seemed ordinary. But internally, I had been managing perception, holding 2 truths at once. What I felt and what I allowed to be visible. That internal division is expensive. Coherence reduces that cost. When your words match your internal state, your system no longer has to maintain the split. Breath deepens, muscles soften, energy returns. That is why coherence feels like relief. Not because everything is perfect, but because nothing inside you is fighting itself. Coherence is not about being right. It's about being whole. It's when your breath, your words, and your presence all speak the same language. And here is where it becomes consequential. When coherence stabilizes, your nervous system steadies. And when your nervous system steadies, your behavior changes. Not dramatically, subtly. You tolerate less misalignment. You speak earlier instead of later. Like a pendulum that swings less each time, your return to coherence is faster now. And because your behavior changes, your life reorganizes. Not mystically, behaviorally. Stable internal states create stable external patterns. When you stop reacting impulsively, your choices become more consistent, and consistent choices shape your life. Coherence is not spiritual perfection. It is biological integrity. Integrity changes the decisions you make, and decisions change your trajectory. The next term I'll define is recursive. Recursive means something comes up again, but you meet it differently. It's not a loop where you are stuck. It's a spiral where you are moving. You may revisit the same insecurity, the same trigger, the same old reflex to manage and withdraw, but something is different. You notice it sooner, you breathe through it more quickly, you don't stay in it as long. Before integration, a trigger might have destabilized you for days. Now, it may move through you in hours. Before integration, you might have reacted automatically. Now, you pause. Before integration, you may have spiraled into shame. Now, you feel the activation, but you don't collapse into it. The pattern looks familiar, but your nervous system is more regulated inside it. That is recursive growth, not repetition as failure. Repetition with increasing stability. Integration is recursive because the nervous system learns through exposure. Each time you experience a triggering event without overriding it, you strengthen regulation. Each return to steadiness becomes easier. That is the spiral. You're not going backward. You're revisiting with more capacity. I'd like to talk about the breath after collapse. The breath after collapse is different. It is the breath that arrives when the storm is past. Before collapse, breath is often tight. After collapse, it may feel shallow or uneven. But during integration, something changes. Breath deepens without force. You don't take a deep breath. It arrives on its own. In my own experience, I began noticing something subtle but profound. For years, I had been breathing shallowly without realizing it. My breath rarely reached the bottom of my lungs. It hovered high in my chest, efficient, functional, but guarded. And then something shifted. Without trying, without deciding to breathe differently, deep breaths began coming on their own, fuller, freer, unbidden. Not as a technique, not as a practice, but as a biological release. That was one of the clear signs of integration for me. You might notice this in yourself. Perhaps your breathing has changed over time. Perhaps you sigh more deeply now. Perhaps your exhale lingers a little longer. Not because you're forcing it, but because your body feels slightly safer. Pause here. Notice your breathing. Is it trying, or is it simply moving? There is a difference. Integration begins when your body stops preparing for danger that isn't actually there. When it no longer feels the need to brace for what might happen next. When the breath can move freely because the nervous system is no longer on guard. And sometimes, the first place you notice that shift is not in your thoughts, not in your identity, but in your breath. That is where integration becomes undeniable. In my life as Laura, integration did not arrive as relief. It arrived as exhaustion. There were years where I managed perception. I anticipated discomfort before it happened. That is hypervigilance, a trauma response where the nervous system scans constantly for threat. When collapse happened, my body crashed. Fatigue, head pressure, migraine, jaw tension, restlessness, abdominal cramping. Integration felt biological, not spiritual. It felt like I'm too worn out to keep acting like I'm fine. And slowly, something softened. Not because I forced it, but because I stopped overriding. Integration became the realization I don't have to fake being okay. I can just be myself. I can just breathe. I remember another life. It wasn't big or legendary, but it shaped me in ways I'm only now beginning to feel. It was in a coastal village. There was wind that always carried salt and wood smoke and never fully stilled. It had narrow paths between stone houses and nets drying along the shore. I was not called a healer in any mystical sense. I was the woman people came to when they were sick or grieving, when a child had a fever, when a fisherman did not return, when grief would not loosen its grip. I made poultices, I boiled herbs, I sat beside beds. But what I really offered was steadiness. I had learned how to regulate my breath when others could not, how to keep my voice calm in crisis, how to stay present when fear rose in the room. I could sit beside a bed and make the room feel less chaotic. People felt safer around me. And over time, that steadiness became my identity. I was useful, reliable, the one who did not fall apart. But here's what I understand now, through the lens of coherence. My steadiness was built on overriding my own signals. I was steady outwardly and divided inwardly. If I was exhausted, I concealed it. If I was grieving, I postponed it. If I was afraid, I swallowed it. My external expression was calm. My internal state was often not. That is incoherence. But in that lifetime, it was praised. You are strong. You hold us together. You never falter. The more I performed steadiness, the more it became my identity. My baseline was usefulness. And in that community, usefulness determined belonging. And I internalized that equation. No one ever asked if I was resting. And over time, the split between internal and external widened. The body can maintain incoherence for a while. It can suppress, override, push through, but it cannot do so indefinitely. There was a winter when illness spread quickly through the village. I worked constantly. I barely slept. And when my body began to weaken, I ignored it. I told myself I could hold a little longer, because that is what I had always done. And when collapse came, it came quietly. Fever, disorientation, weakness, a body that would not respond to willpower the way it once had. Lying near the hearth, listening to wind against stone, there was a realization. For the first time, I was not the steady one. For the first time, I could not override. And there was a realization, simple and clear. I knew how to regulate for others. I did not know how to regulate inward. I did not know how to be coherent within myself. Integration did not complete in that lifetime. The pattern remained unfinished. When I look at my life now as Laura, the hypervigilance, the exhaustion from managing perception, the instinct to hold the room, I feel the echo, not as an imagined story, but as a familiar pattern. I now recognize this pattern in this life as Laura in my career as a 911 dispatcher and healthcare worker. The same survival strategy was showing up again. Be steady, be useful, hold the room, ignore your own signals. Where the pattern originally formed is less important than this. It is recognizable. And what is recognizable can be completed. Whether you interpret the pattern of repetition as a familial pattern or just a habit, it is an echo of past survival strategies replaying in the present. It is the loop of behavior, belief, or emotion that keeps cycling because it was never fully integrated. The principle remains. Unresolved incoherence accumulates. If we repeatedly suppress what we feel in order to maintain a presentation, the nervous system adapts to that suppression, and tension becomes normal. Internal division can become a way of life. Integration now is not about becoming mystical. It is about ending the split. It's about allowing internal experience and external expression to match. It's about learning steadiness that includes the self, not steadiness that erases the self. And when that coherence stabilizes across years, across generations, across whatever span you believe in, something shifts. Presence becomes the foundation of identity, and that changes everything. Your current struggle might not be new. It might be the echo of something unfinished. Integration may be the moment where a pattern that has lasted longer than this lifetime finally softens. And when that softening stabilizes, something new becomes possible. Not just rest, direction. Not just regulation, purpose that is no longer built on proving or rescuing. We'll explore that more in our next episode. For now, simply notice this may not be the first time your system has tried to hold everything together, but it may be the first time it is allowed to rest. There is a strange space during integration. It's called the identity gap. The identity gap is the period where you're no longer who you were, but you don't yet recognize who you are becoming. It can feel like emptiness, lack of motivation, loss of urgency, mild depression, confusion about purpose. This is not failure. It is recalibration. In my life as Laura, the identity gap felt like exhaustion after years of being the steady one. If I was not managing, not fixing, not anticipating, then who was I? Without hypervigilance, there was silence, and silence can feel like disappearance. In that coastal life, the identity gap arrived too late. It arrived only when my body collapsed, when I could no longer be useful, and I didn't know yet how to exist without being useful. In previous lives, integration often required physical death or severe trauma to complete. The body had to break for the soul to realign. This was because the nervous system was not yet capable of holding the frequency of transformation without collapse. But now, the nervous system has evolved. It can stabilize while integrating. It can hold paradox without shattering. This is why integration no longer requires death. The identity gap allows the old role to dissolve before the body breaks. The identity gap is the space between performance and presence. It is the pause between who I had to be and who I actually am. It is uncomfortable because your nervous system is no longer fueled by urgency. And urgency once felt like identity. But here is something important. You don't have to push yourself to become someone new. When your nervous system calms down, you'll naturally start to see who you really are and what's important to you. But it doesn't work the other way around. If you try to create a new identity while you're still stressed or unstable, that identity will be based on survival habits, not your true self. Let the body stabilize first. Let the breath deepen. Let the baseline settle. Clarity of direction, what we might call purpose, emerges naturally from regulation. It cannot be forced. The identity gap is not emptiness. It is incubation, and incubation is quiet. I'd like to take a moment now to talk about integration and relationships. When your baseline changes, relationships change. Not because you are more evolved, but because your nervous system behaves differently. If someone is used to you over-functioning and you stop, the relationship dynamic shifts. Some feel relief, some feel destabilized. This is not about frequency. It's about regulation patterns. You become less available for chronic dysregulation. And that is allowed. You are allowed to change how you relate. You are allowed to become less available for patterns that no longer match your breath. Integration is not just internal. It ripples outward. And when your nervous system stabilizes, it will no longer resonate with those who require your dysregulation to feel safe. This is not abandonment. This is coherence. Let the relationships that can't breathe with you fall away. Let the ones that can stay. And let that be enough. Take a breath now. Feel what has already changed. We do not rush into the next spiral. We let it arrive. The next thing I'll talk about is external reorganization. External reorganization is when your life starts to change on the outside because something inside you has stabilized. It is a shift in your environment, relationships, and opportunities that mirrors the new frequency of your internal state. It's not about rearranging circumstances. It's about circumstances rearranging themselves in response to your stabilized breath. External reorganization is not forced. It is not planned. It's the natural consequence of integration. It's not a miracle event, a sudden windfall, a dramatic collapse. It's not chaos. It's your new stability showing up in your life. External reorganization is not what you do. It's what happens when you finally stop doing what is not you. It's not about making changes. It's about noticing that your life is already changing because you've stopped living from old patterns. Thresholds change during external reorganization. A threshold is the point at which you stop tolerating what no longer aligns with your stabilized state. They change because your internal baseline has shifted, and your nervous system no longer supports the same levels of tolerance, overextension, or misalignment. When your baseline stabilizes, you say no sooner because your energy no longer supports overextension. You explain yourself less because you no longer seek external validation. You pause before reacting because your nervous system is no longer in survival mode. You stop repairing what isn't yours because you recognize what is not your responsibility. These are thresholds. As your coherence stabilizes, your thresholds recalibrate to reflect your new state of integrity. It's not a boundary you set with others. It's a boundary that naturally arises when your internal coherence no longer supports old patterns. You may find yourself saying no sooner, needing less explanation, pausing before reacting, releasing roles you once carried. These are not decisions. They are thresholds shifting to match your stabilized breath. Thresholds are not fixed. They are the living edges of your coherence. As you stabilize, they move, not to limit you, but to protect what you've integrated. Now that your life is reorganizing itself, the question arises, can you trust what is emerging? External reorganization is the mirror. Trust is the breath that allows you to look into it without flinching. Trust isn't about believing. It's about how flexible your nervous system is. It's about the health of your vagus nerve. When your vagal tone gets better, your heart rate evens out, your breathing gets deeper naturally. You bounce back faster from stress. You'll still get upset sometimes, but you'll calm down more quickly. That quick return to calm is what resilience is. And that's what integration looks like. Trust is the breath that allows you to release. But release is tiring because your body has been holding for so long. Integration often feels exhausting. Trust opens the door. Fatigue is what walks through it. Let it. It's not weakness. It's the cost of carrying what you no longer need. Because bracing is expensive. When you stop bracing, your body finally rests. And when it rests, it releases. Fatigue, headaches, emotional waves. This is parasympathetic activation, rest and repair mode. If you have lived in fight or flight for years, rest will feel foreign. Trust it anyway. Now that you understand why fatigue is part of integration, let's give your body a way to stabilize. Place one hand on your chest and one on your abdomen. Inhale for 4. Hold for 2. Exhale for 6. Again, the longer exhale stimulates the vagus nerve. Let's repeat 3 times. So inhale for 4. Hold for 2. Exhale for 6. Inhale for 4. Hold for 2. Exhale for 6. Integration happens through small, repeated moments of regulation, not dramatic breakthroughs. This breath practice is not a ritual. It is a return, a way to remind your body what safety feels like. Now that you've practiced stabilizing your breath, I'd like you to remember this. You are not here to be perfect, because perfection is a mask, and masks block breath. You are here to be whole, and wholeness includes the parts that tremble. You are here to breathe, to spiral, to remember, not to perform. You are not here to arrive at a final state of being. Arrival is an illusion of the linear mind, an endpoint. But the soul is not linear, it spirals. You are here to spiral into coherence. Let's pause here. Breathe. You are already spiraling. There is no ultimate version of you to become. The journey is not toward perfection, but toward coherence. Each breath, each return, each spiral is the state you are meant to dwell in. You are here to remember. And each time you return to coherence, you bring more of yourself with you. You are here to return to coherence again and again, because life will pull you out of coherence, because the world is loud, because your nervous system is adaptive, because forgetting is part of the spiral. But each return is deeper. Each return is faster. Each return is more complete. Here are some points to remember. Integration is a widening spiral. Each return deepens your coherence. You may still feel triggered, but you return to steadiness sooner. Even when you feel fragmented, you are not broken. You are stabilizing through recalibration. You are finding your center. Healing is not linear. It is a spiral of breath. Each loop, a deeper remembering. Each forgetting, a necessary release, until your coherence becomes your baseline. Let your breath be your guide. Let your spiral be your path. Let your return be your home. In closing, integration is the breath after collapse. It is quiet, it is subtle, it does not announce itself. But one day you notice You are less reactive. You still get activated, but you return to steadiness more quickly. You speak more directly. You rest more deeply. Your body does not brace as quickly. That is the new baseline. That is coherence, when your internal state and your outward behavior no longer contradict each other. Let's pause here. Let the breath settle. Let the spiral complete. Take one final breath with me. Inhale slowly. Hold. Exhale longer than you inhaled. That longer exhale signals safety. You are here. Your nervous system is settling. You are rebuilding from steadiness rather than urgency. In the next episode, we'll explore what happens when this steadiness begins to shape direction. Not purpose as pressure, but purpose as alignment between a regulated body and the choices you make. Until then, stay steady, trust the breath. This process of recalibration is human, and even in the quiet, you are not alone in learning how to stabilize after years of bracing. Let this breath be the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. Let this spiral be your path. Let this stillness be your home. Thank you for listening. Thank you for breathing with me. And I'll see you next time.